The following information was presented at the Cuyahoga Falls School Board meeting on October 22nd. This is Superintendent Andrea Selico bringing you an overview of the redrawing of the elementary school boundary lines in the event that you were unable to make it to the meeting or fully capture the spirit of the conversation due to limitations with the audio or the inability to see our PowerPoint. First, I want to state that no decisions were made at the meeting. Our transportation supervisor, Margie Johnson, walked us through 3 possible scenarios of where our lines could potentially be drawn. This was our first stab at looking at the data more closely and taking into consideration the number of students that would be displaced and the school in which they would be reassigned. In the presentation, Ms. Johnson specifically stated that while she would be presenting 3 scenarios to consider, there are still numerous ways in which the lines could be drawn. So to be clear, our intention was to present to the board ideas that could get them thinking about possibilities rather than trying to have all the assignments made within just a couple of weeks to work on it. So with that said, we made a lot of progress and intend to have final routes drawn by the end of the calendar year, with our next meeting taking place on November 19th to further discuss our options. After having time to reflect on the presentation, I'm going to ask that you bear with me as I briefly mention Scenario 1. Scenario 1, as presented, does not work, but it was an example that we presented to the board. In this particular example, the projected enrollment at Price exceeds the building's capacity. So rather than spend a lot of time on the scenario, I'm going to skip ahead to Scenario 2 and spend a little more time walking you through that one. I will also explain what each of these tables means in more detail when talking about scenarios 2 and 3. As we look at the second scenario, I want to point out that this is one of the scenarios that the board will be considering. The board would like to break this down further to understand more of the implications and options that may be available under this scenario. You will note that the capacities, when compared to the current boundaries, all fall within our capacity limits. You will see the numbers on the left side map, which represent how many students would attend each of the schools. Now, with that said, those numbers are estimates because we do not have the kindergarten numbers for next year. Therefore, we estimated the number of kindergartners based on the current enrollment. We were able to factor in some kindergartners that are currently enrolled in preschool, as we made the assumption that they would be attending kindergarten next year with us. What is not included in any of the scenarios are the open enrolled students and intra-district placements. In this next slide, the dots represent where students live, but with that said, some of the dots may actually represent more than one student based on the number of students residing in a household or the possibility of students being in apartment buildings, for example. You may also observe that some of the students will be attending schools that are farther away than a school that is actually closer to their home. So that is true in some of these scenarios. Our transportation supervisor is able to manipulate the lines, and when doing so, the dots adjust and provide us with the data needed to consider the various options. This goes back to my opening remarks that speak to the many different ways that lines can be drawn. However, when creating lines, there are many factors that must be taken into consideration, many of them having to do with student safety. The next 2 slides show tables that represent the number of students that will go to the various schools. On the left side, the tables represent the current enrollment and the breakdown of where each student would go next year. So, DeWitt currently has 339 students. And again, just to illustrate what these tables mean, of the 339 students, 210 of them would stay at DeWitt, while 28 students would go to Lincoln, 16 would go to Price, 78 would go to Richardson, and 7 would go to Silver Lake. You can also see the breakdown in each grade level as well. The right-hand, smaller table represents the number of students that would be coming to DeWitt. As you can see in this particular scenario, 336 students would be attending DeWitt next year. And again, you can see the breakdown there by grade level. You can apply this same example as you look at the other tables for each of the schools. Finally, we have Scenario 3, which meets all capacity limits and one that the Board of Education will be considering to analyze further, along with Scenario 2. I'm not going to go into detail on this one, but please use the explanation I gave earlier and just apply it to this scenario. Here are scenario 3's depiction of where students live and where they would attend. And finally, the tables once again to illustrate where students currently attend and where they would attend in scenario 3. So in conclusion, I would like to note that we will continue to work on these maps. We are currently exploring ways with the company TransFinder to zoom in and get closer to street level, and to also have the ability to enlarge the maps in order to view them more critically. And we will certainly be having more discussion that will come as our staff and board will continue to chip away at this and come back prepared for more conversation at our November 19th board meeting. We just ask that you please remain patient as you have been, and please know that our goal is to provide our families with their building assignments before winter break. I thank you for your patience as we work through this process. Thank you again.